finest realize it feels so good just to be alive. Time's a gift, my time is free. I could spend it on you, you could spend it on me. I could say you'll be blown away by the change you see me. And I feel alright, dance all night, put a little flavor in my life. I put the good stuff in. I put the good stuff in, yeah, yeah. I put the good stuff in, yeah, yeah. I put the good stuff in every day. I'm gonna be the best version of me. Float like a butterfly, sting like a bee, roar like a lion, and I ain't even trying, no, 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 no. And I can say I'll be blown away by the change you see me. And I feel alright, dance all night, put a little flavor in my life. I put the good stuff in, yes I do, yeah.
Where you are a customer. You are a unhappy, unwilling customer, but you are a customer. And you probably often need help with something like Bitcoin, right? Because, I mean, this is the last piece that's coming. So actually, F-Secure did a study where they went and got infected by 5 ransomware variants on virtual machines and didn't pay the ransom, right? And they walked all the way through the very end to see, like, how do they help you? How much are they willing to negotiate, et cetera? And they actually found that, the level of customer service was actually good enough that there are some help desks out there that maybe should get business consulting input from some of the ransomware folks. I'm saying this, I worked at a help desk for 2.5 years in college, right? So, but there's stereotypes out there for good reason, after all. But the last piece of this is we've had worms and viruses with us for a long time, right? I mean, they've been out for a while. But what's changed is Bitcoin. Now, I'm not here to knock Bitcoin as a financial construct, but what it provides is a relatively reliable, in that, it takes some work to figure out how to do it, but it works, and wholly anonymous payment method, especially that puts people outside of US jurisdiction. So if you combine all that together, that's to me why this is not going to slow down. Now, a little bit of a step to the side. This is now kind of my IT operation background talking. We're used to competition in various ways. We're used to maybe software as a service, things start to go outside the data center in whatever ways, and we manage that. We're used to shadow IT. We're even used to vendors that come in. Like I used to install some things myself. Other things I would pay someone to come and do services and set up. That's a form of competition for my job if I didn't have enough time to do it. This is a business that competes with or exploits rather, the inefficiencies in the IT stack. How many of us know that every single system in our data center is fully patched and up to date? Every now and then I get a hand raised, and I never want to question that, like especially if people are focused on this and it's their job, right? But we're talking printer security, we're talking network devices, switches, routers, firewalls, of course servers and BIOS levels and all the general purpose OSs and hypervisors, right? That's a lot of stuff. So this is where ransomware is actually competing and taking advantage of the inefficiency created by all those layers of the stack, right? This is going to be hard to stop. So classic defense recommendations. Because so far all I've done is just be very discouraging with some maybe mildly funny stories along the way. With any of these, we are now into security territory. So we are talking about defense in depth or multiple layers, right? And any time that you have multiple layers, you have to think about the operational overhead. Because if you don't think about that, any given layer you won't actually be usable because it won't be monitored enough. You won't have time to keep it up. This is the classic problem often with SIEMs or event monitoring. The tagline is like a barking chihuahua because it's alerting you about everything, and so you don't pay attention to any of it, right, kind of thing. So first, we often have what I like to call before the attack or before the event, human focused. This is around user education. There's companies like KnowBe4 in this space, helping to move the dial of people what they should click on, how they should use their machines, that kind of thing. Then there's the before the fact technology focused. Things like next generation firewalls, Palo Alto, antivirus filtering, Symantec, Blue Coat, et cetera. I used to say Kaspersky in there. Now I only say it to see if I get any smiles from folks, right? That kind of thing. There's also before the fact financial. And this I find fascinating. You can actually buy ransomware insurance. And I find it interesting just the fact that it exists, that financial firms out there thought there was a reason in a market to create it. Now, whenever you get insurance, is there fine print with it, like a lot of it, that's very long that we probably never read because we assume it's just car insurance or health insurance and it doesn't matter, like we got to take it? Well, in this case, some of the policies out there actually state that unless you are up to date on your patches at the time of the attack, they will not pay out. That's a big bit of fine print, right? So be aware. And then, of course, there is after the fact, technology focused, which leads us into data protection and backups, right? Because, I mean, eventually, if all of these things were working, we never get down here, but obviously these aren't. We're getting down, or we're even getting to the point where people have to pay ransoms, right? So we're getting down to this layer. So that leads us into the theory. Backups are a must. Or conducting frequent backups when you can recover from them is critical. This is from Health and Human Services, for HIPAA regulations, et cetera. Does anyone in here not have backups, and don't answer that question if you don't? Especially if you have a coworker or your boss is in the room, you know, that kind of thing, right? But I mean, we all know this. So and we're done, right? Because everyone's got backups, and you can restore those backups. So there must be something else going on here. So let's look at traditional architecture. Generally speaking, for a long time, it's been, you know, get software from company A, install it on servers from company B, you know, tape from company C, offsite archives. And there haven't been a lot of improvements. There have been some minor ones. You know, my previous history as a customer, I ran backup exec. New guy out of school, like, no one wants to run backups, here you go. We went to Tivoli Storage Manager. I've done a lot of stuff with Avamar and Data Domain. There have been improvements, but they've been around disk and deduplication. Now, these have helped with backup speeds and restore speeds, but what they haven't helped at all with is complexity, right? So we've got more pieces that are worthwhile and justified as we've done other projects in our data center, but we've made the data centers we've gone along more complex. So what this turns into is, you know, kind of like, this is like back when I was out of college. I would come in every morning, I would get my Mountain Dew, the first of 3 or 4 for the day before it switched to coffee, right? And you'd come in, you know, bright and cheery, maybe, hopefully, after the Mountain Dew. And you sit down and you start to look at all the failed backup jobs and think about your schedules and jobs. And every morning you would just kind of turn into a sad panda. You'd be sitting at your desk and it's like, man, I got to do this morning and then I can get to the stuff I want to do. The flip side then is, too, that any given day when you go to restore something, do you know for sure that that's going to be there? If you've always had this, you know, this drumbeat of cadence of stuff that's always been going wrong, you got to fix. And it turns into something a little more like this, that any given day from a restore perspective, your results may vary. You may have to go back to the day before or previously or find an issue that you hadn't known about, right? That kind of thing. So how do we get here? It started out easily enough. You know, we have, you know, backup proxy, maybe backup server and the SAN. I'm not even going back 20 years. I'm going back like, you know, 10 or 15 years kind of thing. But as we grow this, the environment becomes more complex. We also have to, for scaling reasons, we have to add in database servers, even search servers. Then we have multiple scale and touch points to manage. We have to start thinking about, we have a whole backup infrastructure now, and we have to think about single points of failure. Major financial, organizational, reputational impact of the company. Do they exist? I would argue they don't, practically speaking, right? Now, before we keep going, I want to step Now, I'm not walking back the comments about ransomware attacks, but that's in like 40 to 70% per year. That's not every single day. And to maintain something like this, you've got to pay that price when you've got lots of other stuff to do every single day, right? Kind of thing. So the day that you cut corners, just because someone's yelling at you to get another project done, you don't go as deep. Who knows, but that might not be the day. So the overarching architectural concept like in a good way. So, but this is not a business priority, right? There's a lot of other things that impact the business. So if you're going to attack it at this level, you need things that can have business. Worked with projects where there's weeks or months of implementation, as well as there's a lot of day-to-day operation. So how do we do this with Rubrik? Let's just start off with, this is a customer. Like this could be you, right? I mean, this is a real customer. Right? You can run this on, if you get it from us, it's Supermicro hardware, just like a Nutanix kind of thing. But you can run it on Lenovo, HP, et cetera. 4 nodes per appliance is the 2U-N4 form factor. But the big fifty settings or so, that's actually not an exaggeration, right? So for us, a policy is literally time, and you can transform your data center into next, immutability of snapshots. This is the idea that no matter what happens to your primary systems, that newly encrypted data that gets backed up can never compromise previously backed up data. Obviously a big deal in a ransomware scenario, because like, that SQL Server example that we talked about at the beginning. So there are systems out there that cannot be configured to be immutable. There are some that can be configured to be immutable. Guess when people usually start to think about that? Maybe a little too late. And there are some that are immutable by default. Obviously, because I'm talking about this, Rubrik is immutable by default. We control the file system, the application layer. No new backups can ever change previous backups. They're made read-only. They're actually gated away. Even when we do some live mount capabilities, we store the changes as deltas and then throw them away without modifying the underlying data. I harp on this a little bit just because often people don't think about it until it's too late. There is one gentleman at one of our competitors, not naming him or the competitor, because I'm not trying to go competitive per se, but like I credit him because he talks regularly on Twitter pointing to people to forum posts, their company's forum posts about customers who've been hit by ransomware and the steps that they now need to take or should have taken beforehand to make their backups immutable. But from a Rubrik perspective, this is by default, period. Every backup is immutable. Big deal from a ransomware perspective. Next. Unless maybe you have 10 or 40 gigabit kind of thing, or I could say like, a 500 gig VM, whatever, make the stakes a little higher. But this is why when you look at some of the Rubrik marketing, it says near zero RTO or near zero restore time, because you can literally click a button, say live mount, it'll bring the virtual machine online running off of Rubrik. It integrates with the vSphere API to expose that. Network will be disconnected so you don't cause IP conflicts, or you can put it back in place. So what this enables is even something like backups have been running as they were supposed to, of course, because they were not having to monitor them as much. And they went through 5 iterations of a virtual machine before they found the one before the ransomware attack. So, live mount, 60 seconds, the VM's up, they're kind of browsing inside in the vSphere client, the vCenter client. Nope, that's not the one, let's try again, let's try again, let's try again. They were able to go through multiple iterations of that virtual machine, and then at the end, it ended up literally just being given IP number, Control-C, Control-V. That simple of just move some files back kind of thing. But they were critical files to the company. The other example that I'll often talk about here is there was an organization where, and this is when Fortune 100, so I have to anonymize this, and apologies, but real example. They had it was on 3:30 p.m. on guess what day? Friday, right? It's too perfect, but it was actually true in this case. The VP of infrastructure calls to the director of backups because it's a multi-site global backup team. It says, we have a 5-server environment that's revenue generating that's down. That really stinks. Within about 15 to 20 minutes, the director of backups is back on the phone and says, hey, we believe we have all this up. It looks like it's up. Can you please check with your folks to validate that everything's running correctly? Puts the phone down, comes back a couple minutes later, and a little bit of happy cursing ensues, right? Along the lines of like, how the blank did you get whatever back kind of thing. What was happening was actually they were live mounted off of Rubrik because we've got flash as well as hard drives in the box. So we are not primary storage performance, but sufficient for the purpose. storage vMotioning back under the covers, 15 minutes because of multiple virtual machines, as well as making sure that any database transactions are committed at an application level. You know, this was a 3-tier stack kind of thing, a web application database. And it was back online. Last you want, Virtualize Automate. Yes, you can. And instead of me kind of beating this to death, the way that I like to usually close this out is with really just the voice of a customer. So I would ask you, kind of consider this as this is not a video per se about Rubrik, but more a customer telling about their ransomware experience and how they recovered. It's about we are focused, obviously. The key focuses here that we're hitting on was around reliability and speed. Q&A because I don't want to take away from the next gentleman's time. But I will be both outside and or up at our booth if you'd like to chat later. So thank you for the attention. I appreciate it.